I'm really concerned about Americans who don't have access to air travel because of where they live. And I want to know how we can ensure that millions of Americans who don't live around major cities can have access to reliable, efficient flights, and that the airlines themselves stay afloat. Can you give me your perspective on that?
Well, thanks, Senator. I agree this is a big problem. And I think the core thing to start by understanding is why this happens. Why are small cities, why are mid-sized cities losing air service? And I think there's really two reasons behind it. The first is that in some places it is uneconomical to serve. The volume of passengers is very small, and it's costly to fly. And in those places, it's not going to make sense for an airline to serve unless they get a subsidy or unless there's a requirement, a kind of duty to serve like we have in other areas of law. The second reason is because of consolidation. As a number of people have mentioned already up on this witness stand, and as has been mentioned by Senator Lee, this is an industry in which there are network effects, there's economies of scale, and there are barriers to entry. And those things create tendencies towards consolidation and concentration. And when you have that, there's an incentive for airlines to focus their operations in bigger and bigger cities. That's why we have the hubs that we have. And that often means dehubbing certain places or reducing service to others. And I think this is a serious problem because we have an airline system that is essential infrastructure for our country. It provides...
You in your testimony go into that a lot. And you speak actually, I think, quite persuasively about the economic benefit to our country as a whole when you ease transportation. Roads, we don't not pave roads to areas. And you almost say that it should be almost like a utility and that kind of obligation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And if you think about it this way, would you ever start a Fortune 500 company in a city with no air service? You wouldn't do it. If you were an entrepreneur with a great idea, a kid growing up...
But we've even seen VC dollars, far more, if you have a direct from Silicon Valley, VC dollars more. That's how vital it is that people won't even necessarily even invest in businesses that don't have that. There's a correlation, I should say, maybe not a causation.
And that's why this is basic infrastructure. And I think that what we want as a country is for people who grow up anywhere to have opportunity.
But your solution to that is for Congress to act.
Yes, I think that's right. So the current solution that we have right now I don't think is working, and that's the Essential Air Service Program. It provides a subsidy to a number of very small cities, but these are very, very small cities, and they don't include a number of other places that have lost service in recent years. I think one proposal that I've put forward, and these are ideas that I think should be debated, is what I call the NFL draft pick model. And the idea is that the biggest airlines would be like the teams. There'd be a bunch of cities that would be like the players, and the airlines would have to pick cities that they want to serve, would go in order, until all the cities are covered, and they would have to have affordable access.
Right, and I'm just going to interrupt you because I want to get one more question in before my time, but it is this concern I have about the hollowing out of certain communities because of consolidation. We've talked about it in the agricultural sector. We've seen entire businesses being killed in towns that are the connective tissue of our country. And I think this should be one of the things we should be looking at when these towns and communities lose air traffic, they lose economic investment, they lose opportunity, and many times they lose out on what adds, how should I say it, adds vibrancy to a community. I just want to shift, Mr. McGee, to you really quickly in the remaining time that I have, can you speak to me about an idea that I really believe in, which is this idea of passengers have fundamental rights, and what Congress could do to better protect passengers who still often report very bad experiences. I think that Senator Hawley was scratching at that as well. Well, maybe not scratching, but pounding at that as well.
Yes, thank you, Senator. The fact is the United States lags much of the world in terms of passenger rights. This is the standard operating system in the European Union, United Kingdom, Canada, India, countries all over the world, that there are mandatory rights in terms of how you'll be compensated when there is a flight delay, a cancellation, mishandled baggage. Here in the United States, we greatly allow airlines to police themselves. They write contracts of carriage written for and by themselves, and we adhere to them every time we swipe a credit card and buy a ticket. Now, the fact is that the irony is the largest U.S. airlines, Delta, American, United, if you're flying on them and you encounter a problem, a canceled flight or a delay on foreign soil, you will be treated much better than on American soil. So if you're on Delta and your flight is canceled, you want to be in Brussels, not Atlanta.
I want to just be respectful of Senator Moody, but I just want to say, because there's so much bipartisan space, and I'm not trying to be partisan, but the Trump administration has rolled back some rules that would have given passengers transparency. Can you talk about the actual impact for American consumers of that?
It would be devastating. As I said, we already lag much of the world, but the few existing protections that we have, as I said, Airlines for America issued a 93-page suggestion to the DOT, and unfortunately it seems like this DOT is adhering to it. It would be devastating. Right now, they're doing it in a request for further information. We and others will be weighing in, but we should all be on guard that if you think air travel is problematic now, it will be absolutely awful a year from now if the DOT rolls back the provisions that we already have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moody.
During a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in September, Senator Cory Booker, Democrat, New Jersey, turned the floor over to a colleague who began on a lighthearted note but quickly shifted into serious concerns. The discussion focused on the decline of air travel access for millions of Americans who live outside major cities. Professor Ganesh Sitaraman of Vanderbilt Law School explained that the loss of service to small and mid-sized communities has two main causes. First, some routes are simply uneconomical. Too few passengers and high costs make it difficult for airlines to justify operating there without subsidies or requirements. Second, consolidation in the airline industry has pushed carriers to concentrate on larger hubs, leaving smaller cities behind. Sitaraman argued that air service should be treated as essential infrastructure, much like roads and utilities. Without it, communities lose business investment, venture capital, and opportunities for growth. He noted that no major company would choose to base itself in a city with no airport, highlighting how directly access to flights shapes economic futures. Current federal programs, such as the Essential Air Service (EAS) initiative, were described as too limited. They primarily support very small towns, leaving many mid-sized cities that have lost service with no help. As an alternative, Sitaraman suggested what he called an NFL draft pick model. In this system, major airlines would be required to choose cities in turn, ensuring that service is spread across the country rather than concentrated only in profitable hubs. The conversation then turned to passenger rights. Another witness, William McGee, argued that U.S. travelers lag behind much of the world in protections against delays, cancellations, and baggage mishandling. While the European Union, Canada, India, and other countries guarantee compensation in such cases, American passengers rely on contracts written by airlines themselves. Ironically, McGee pointed out, if a Delta passenger's flight is canceled in Brussels, they receive better treatment than if the same thing happened in Atlanta. The hearing also touched on recent rollbacks of transparency and consumer protection rules. Witnesses warned that if the Department of Transportation continues to weaken existing safeguards, air travel conditions for Americans, already considered poor compared to global standards, could become even worse within the next year. The exchange highlighted bipartisan concerns over both the shrinking reach of U.S. air service and the weak protections for passengers, raising the question of whether Congress should step in to treat air travel more like a public utility.